Today, we have a special guest with us sharing all about how she took her family on a 2 week trip to Europe this summer, including a stop in Paris for the Olympics. Keep listening to hear all the details. Welcome to Points Talk with the Travel Mom Squad. We are three moms who've discovered how to leverage credit card welcome offers to get hundreds of thousands of dollars of travel expenses for nearly free. We've used credit card points and miles to take vacations to places like Hawaii, Paris, Greece, Maldives, Japan, and so much more. And the best part, we each still have 800 plus credit scores. Imagine being able to take the vacation of your dreams for nearly free. It's totally possible, and we're here to show you how. Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Jess. Let's talk points. We have a very special guest on today's episode. Our digital business manager, Megan, is back once again sharing a recent family trip with us. She just got back from a 2-week international trip to Europe with her family of 5. It included Paris for the Olympics, Rome, Amsterdam, and more. We have a lot to cover. So let's get to it. Megan, tell us how this trip came about, how you strategized this trip, because a family of 5 traveling is difficult as it is. And then going to multiple different cities in Europe, I'm assuming is a little bit complicated. So walk us through your strategy for just planning this trip.
Well, it initially started for the Olympics. That was the big thing. We wanted to go to the Japan Olympics a couple years ago, but because of COVID, obviously that was all screwed up. But I was like, oh, Paris, we can do that. I've been there a bunch of times. It'll be easy to take the kids. So last March, tickets started opening for the Olympic events. So you had to get on this lottery and do all this stuff. So this kind of determined the time period that we were traveling. And it's the Olympics are the last 2 weeks of July into August, and that's just when it has to be. So we got our tickets for our events, and I tried to plan them over 2 to 3 days because I wasn't going to be in Paris for 2 weeks. That wasn't the kids' attention span, they're only 9 and 7.5. They're not going to want to go to 20 Olympic events. So we picked 2 events that we knew that would be kind of entertaining. And those ended up being the end of July, 2 days in a row. So then I kind of planned a whole trip around that. And I really wanted to go back to Italy. So I was like, well, let's just do our first half of our trip in Italy, go to Paris, and we'll figure out where to go from there.
Megan, how was the process of getting the Olympic tickets? Thinking ahead for myself, in 4 years when the Olympics are in LA, what is that process like? Is it is it like getting Taylor Swift tickets, or is it a little more chill?
No, so this time they did it very differently. So you entered into a lottery. So I put my name in and put my husband's name in. And then I had my sister sign up. So I was like, I don't know who's going to get picked. Let's just see what we get. And then you were allowed. So if you got selected, you were allowed to buy up to 30 tickets. So a per total. So for 5 of us, that'd be six events total. So then once your lottery was pulled, so that was 2 years ago, basically, is when we entered the lottery. And then we got selected. And last May, we bought our tickets. That was our time period that we were selected for. So it was starting at this time on that day. And I logged in and you could get tickets for anything you wanted. There were gymnastics, there were swimming, there were all these big events, but those obviously were very expensive. And I was I'm not spending more than $100 a person for each event. So we ended up getting table tennis and beach volleyball. And I literally only picked beach volleyball because the venue was under the Eiffel Tower. And I was like, this is going to be really cool. That's going to be really exciting. And then we picked table tennis because there's 4 tables set up at a time. So it's a lot going on. There's a lot of excitement. And so that was just kind of my process for it. But so I just bought those tickets and then that was it. But then my husband ended up getting selected and a couple months later, and there were lots of options. And for resale, you weren't allowed to resell your tickets to general public. In past Olympics, people would jack up the price, how Taylor Swift tickets are, and they would sell them for thousands of dollars. This way, they controlled the whole resale process, and you could only sell your tickets for what you bought them for.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, it was managed really well, I felt. And we really had a lot of options of what we could get tickets for if we wanted them.
Nice.
So this was our second 2-week international trip this year. We did Japan and Korea over spring break. I've said this before, but we don't travel 100% on points. We're not content creators. We're just a normal family. So We have nothing to prove by trying to get everything 100% on points. So we use points and miles to supplement our travel budget. And for 5 of us, I try to focus on flights because that's always our biggest expense. Because you can find hotels for $300 a night for a family, or an Airbnb for even less if you wanted. But traveling during peak summer, our flights were going to be like $1,200 a person, and I wasn't going to pay that. Like, so we used our flight. So I'll just go over all of our flights that we did. So flew out of Toronto, and I feel like I kind of don't even want to tell people this, but I feel like this is like my secret hack that Canada seems to have a lot more points and award availability than like Boston or JFK or Chicago. So every time I try to book flights, there's always like 9+ seats available out of Toronto, and it's only a 2.5 hour drive for us.
I was going to say, just as a refresher, Megan lives in Rochester, New York. So a little bit more convenient to the Canadian airports than maybe me in Houston. But hey, if it's going to get me the availability I need, I am willing to position to Canada.
You know what? My mom lately has, well, I wouldn't say lately, but a few times has positioned to Canada for that very reason. She's like, I can take a direct flight from Denver to, one of those major cities in Canada, and the availability is really, really good.
Yeah. And we have Nexus. So Nexus it gives us like fast pass into Canada. But it also gives us global entry and TSA pre-check. And when we bought it, it was $50 an adult, and kids 18 and under were free. So like for us, the only downside for most people is you have to go to a border crossing for your interviews. You can't just go to any airport like global entry. But for us, it's totally worth it. And like we zipped across through immigration right across the border. And then when we got to the Toronto airport, we were allowed to use like our benefits are reciprocal to Canada. So like we basically had TSA pre-check in Canada, which was so nice. We literally passed this huge long line, and I saw like a Nexus sign. I asked the guy, I was like, are we allowed to use this if we're from the US? And he's like, do you all 5 of you have Nexus? I was like, yeah. And he was like, all right. And we literally just walked right through the line. Like it was like nothing.
So nice.
Yeah, it was so nice. So on the way there, we flew from Toronto to Rome on KLM, and our 5 flights were 75,000 miles total and like $450 in taxes and fees.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so typically adults are 20,000 miles, and the kids get the 25% discount if you're under age 11. So they're 15,000, but since there was a Flying Blue promo award, we were able to get our adult flights are also 15,000 points, which is like the lowest that you can find. Really, for sometimes I guess Virgin Atlantic might have lower ones, but their tax fees are usually a lot higher.
That is a heck of a deal for 5 people for 75,000 miles. Like that. And the nice thing is all 4 major banks transfer to Flying Blue, which is the Air France KLM loyalty program. So you're looking at like one welcome offer from pretty much any bank is going to cover all 5 of those.
Exactly. And like we originally booked to fly out on Sunday because that was the cheapest. But our flight, like a couple months ago, I got an email that our flights were canceled and we had the ability to rebook. They allowed us to rebook on any flight within like 10 days of either direction. And I was like, this is such a good deal. Like,
Oh, I love when that happens. It's the best.
so we were leaving Sunday night. So I actually changed our flights to leave Friday. So we had 2 extra days in Rome, which was, I think, really worth it because it was so hot. Like, I mean, it's summer in Italy and it's like 90 to 100 degrees every single day. The 2 extra days really helped us like spread out all the stuff we wanted to do. So I'm just going to do all the flights and all the information's together. So in the middle of our trip, we flew from Venice to Paris, and we used points for that on Air France. And our 5 economy flights were 31,875,000 miles total and $105. So it's 7,500 points an adult and 5,625 points a kid. And then the big deal was flying home. We flew from Amsterdam on KLM, and this was our first business class flights. I'm pretty sure I just ruined my whole family forever.
That's always what happens.
I remember Megan texting us, and she sent us a picture of, I think it was like your husband and your kids in their business class seats. And you were saying that your husband couldn't believe that he had choices for the meals. And I was like, this is so funny because of course you have choices, but like when you're
Yeah.
in economy, you just get what you get, you
And
know?
I yeah,
So
like, he was like he was because we kinda, like, split ourselves, and so he was texting me, and he was like, "I asked the lady, the flight attendant, how much this whiskey was. They have this fancy whiskey." And she was like, "Mr. Candela, you don't have to pay for anything." And he was like, "What?" It was so funny. So, we ended up flying business class, honestly, because they were cheaper than the economy flights, and I think because of the Olympics and the time period, we were flying home at the beginning of August, right after the Olympics had ended. Our business class flights, we paid 212,500 miles and $1,250 in taxes and fees. So we had that sweet spot of Air France KLM for 50,000 points an adult and 37,500 for a kid under 11.
37,000 points in business class from Amsterdam to Toronto.
And it was a direct flight, so it was, like, 8 hours, and we were delayed a little bit, and I was like, "Who even cares? We're sitting here getting all these snacks."
Right? You're like, please, can you not hurry this? We'd like to have as much time in business class as possible.
Yeah. But those flights really they're available often, like that 50,000 point, from Air France KLM, like, there's people sharing in the Facebook group all the time that they are finding these flights, so they're out there, even from the West Coast, sometimes they're available, like, it is a really great deal, and to be honest, like, we even in economy, we thought KLM was wonderful. The flight attendants were great, we flew overnight on the way there, and, like, the kids and I were asleep before we even took off, and I was like some people were complaining about the seats and different things, and I was like, "No, like, it felt just like any other airline, like, it didn't feel, like, cheap or anything," like and they were so nice.
So when you flew KLM business class home, did you get the def houses with it's gin inside, right?
Yes, it's yeah, I forget what the actual name of it is. But we got 5 of them, so since there was 5 of us, and I was, like, looking at like, trying to make sure we weren't getting any duplicates. So I was like, "What number did you get?" 'Cause they're collectible. So there's, like, 104 of them total, and now we have 5 of them. So I was like, "I need to keep a list, so if we ever do this again."
It's funny because last year, Alex and Pam flew KLM business class and they were sending me pictures of their houses. And I said, there's gin in there, right? And they were like, what? They didn't know. And like, they don't drink. And so,
You can't see it on the podcast, but I'm showing Megan and Jess my little house that I got on my flight.
so cute.
The perfect souvenir once I don't drink. So once I dumped out the gin, it was the perfect souvenir.
Yeah, like, I have them on my windowsill in the kitchen.
Pam was like, I'm glad you told me because what if I thought it was water and just took a sip? And I was like, you would have been in for a rude awakening if you thought that was water and took a sip of it. So it's a good thing that I told you. Okay. So that is flight.
Oh, and one tip though, on KLM and Air France, they when you do like your meal selection, you can just do like whatever for adults because you obviously get a menu when you get on the flight. But you can choose children's flights, even in economy, which I think is so great because sometimes my kids are like, I don't want whatever the adult meal is. Like they're like, they won't even try it. But the kids' meal, they came with like these little like they had like sleep masks and like these little amenity kits, even in economy. And then like their meals had like chicken nuggets and applesauce pouches and fruit snacks. And it was really nice.
You know what, Megan? I'm really glad you just shared that because we are flying KLM economy to Amsterdam later for fall break. And so did you just go online? Like, did you do that just like at check-in or just
Yep. But even before check-in, I think once you select your seats, you can go and you can select meals. And like if you're a vegetarian or whatever, you can do that as a selection for the adults. But there's a children's meal option.
that's great to know because my kids would not. I mean, I got one kid who we go anywhere and he just wants chicken nuggets.
I mean, can I choose chicken nuggets for myself? Because that's not sounding too bad.
My sister did that. She flew with her 1-year-old and she ordered the kids' meal every time on her flights. And the flight attendant was like, "Children's meal?" And she's like, "Yeah, I have a baby here." Like, and she was like, "I wanted to get something I know she would eat also." Yeah, so that was really awesome. And actually, on our flight over, since we fell asleep like almost immediately because it was 10:30 at night. The flight attendant woke me up and asked if the kids were going to eat their meals, and I was like, "No, like they're sleeping. I'm not waking them up." And she was like, "Okay, well, I'm going to give them to other people." So people who hadn't ordered them, they try to repurpose them if there's kids that want a meal and they didn't get a children's meal. I was like, that was really nice too. All right, so we went from Toronto to Rome, and we landed in Rome. We had a layover in Amsterdam, and then we landed in Rome around like lunchtime. And we had an Airbnb for our 5 nights, and we paid cash. That was in the Monty neighborhood, so it's like We literally like walked out our front door, turned right, turned left, and the Coliseum was in front of us. Like we were like right there. Yeah, and this Airbnb, I'll link it. I think I added it to the show notes links. It sleeps up to 6 people. We had 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms with a twin bed and a single bed in each room with like there was no like living room, but there was like a kitchen with a washer and a dryer, and like a table, and they had like board games, and it was a really great Airbnb, and it had air conditioning. That was the biggest priority. I was like, we're gonna like I'm a sweaty person. I cannot deal not having air conditioning when it's 90 degrees outside. And like we kind of planned our days where we were trying to do like one big thing every morning, and then we would take like a lunch break from like 12 to 4. We'd go back to the Airbnb. Sometimes I would like shower because I was like, I need to change my clothes. And we had a washer and dryer. So like I was doing laundry every night just to keep all of our stuff clean. And then we'd go back out later in the afternoon, like 4 or 5 o'clock, and then stay out until after dinner, like 9, 10 o'clock at night. And that worked out really well with the heat, to give everybody a break. And like we were walking a lot. And like the nicest part in Rome, even though it was so hot, they have free water everywhere. Like they have these just like running faucets of water. And so like we would take our water bottles with us and just refill them constantly. And it was so nice to have that literally almost anywhere you could find one.
That's awesome.
That's nice.
Yeah. So we did a Coliseum. We didn't do a tour. I just bought the tickets direct on there and on their website, and we did the arena floor. So this is like a new ticket that they offer. They have underground ones, but those are really hard to get, and there was no way I couldn't figure out the system of when they were released. But we got arena so they rebuilt part of the arena floor, the Coliseum, so you can go out and it's like as if you were like on like the floor. It was so cool. I'm glad we did that instead of just the general admission tickets because I really think that experience of like just being down there and looking up and seeing the whole Coliseum around you of being like, holy cow, like like they used to like flood the arena and bring ships in. Like, how did they do this? Like, like they're not near a body of water. This doesn't even make sense. So it was just like such a grand thing to be able to experience. We did a day at the Vatican. We went to St. Peter's Basilica. That's free to visit. It opens at like 7 a.m. So we just like got there right at opening, went straight in to do the Basilica. And then we had 8 a.m. Vatican Museum tour, our tickets. And we spent a lot of time at the Vatican Museum. They had audio guides that were kid specific and they were tied to like a scavenger hunt. So the girls were they were so entertained by this. They every room we went in, they were like, I need to find this thing. And then they're listening to their audio guides. And I felt like it was so well planned out for kids to keep them entertained because there's a lot to see there.
I've had that experience at a lot of museums in Europe. And so I feel like it's always worth, as a parent, if you have a young kid with you, going to like the information desk when you arrive and just asking, like, do you have anything geared towards kids? Because that was the same thing for us we went to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam and they had an audio guide with a scavenger hunt for kids there also. And the same thing at the Orsay in Paris. And so I feel like it's always worth asking because a lot of times they do have things specific to kids because they know that parents are bringing their kids because the parents want to see it. Maybe the kids aren't as entertained by it, but they come up with these little things to make it more engaging.
Right. And it was really awesome. And one thing to note is the Vatican Museum does not have air conditioning. So it was very hot. They had all the windows and doors open, but like there's a dress code. So you have to have your shoulders covered and your knees covered. Men are supposed to wear slacks. Some, if they had longer shorts on, they were okay. But if women had tank tops on, they were giving them like these like black shawls to like borrow. So that's just like something to be aware of. And one of the best things we did in Rome was this golf cart tour. And I booked it through Airbnb Experiences. And I know Jess is a big fan of looking for those. We met at a local park and got in our golf cart and we drove around for almost 3 hours with our tour guide. And she stopped at all these places, took pictures. She adjusted things for like the kids. Like we didn't get to everything on like the initial list because she was like, I know a really great gelato place. Let me take you there. Like, so like she was like kind of like breaking it up to make it more entertaining for them because it was later in the evening. I think we started at like 5:30. And so she could tell like, she's like, they're not going to have a very big attention span here for all this boring stuff. So we just did like a bunch of highlights and I would really, really recommend it, especially if it's hot because we saw almost everything in that 3-hour tour.
I saw your videos from this and I was like, I need to do that. Like, I need to go to Rome and I need to do this tour because it looked really cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. And, from Rome, we did a day trip to Assisi. It was the train system is so easy in Europe, like, we had no trouble. I downloaded the Trenitalia app, which is, like, the Italian train app, and I was able to just, like, book our tickets right on there, use Apple Pay to pay for everything, and then when we go in, we just scan all of our tickets right off my phone, and then I'd be, like, the last one to go through the turnstile. And it was only, like, 37 euros each way for all 5 of us total. So, like, if you're looking for a day trip, Assisi was a really nice one. I kinda wish we had more time. The village was so cute. It's, like, built into a hilltop. So when we got to the train station, we actually took a taxi to the top of the hill. I read this as a recommendation and then, like, worked our way down because if not, you're just climbing stairs. There's so many stairs. Actually, I was looking back at my, like, Instagram stories and I was like, "Okay," on that day, I was like, "Describe this day in 3 words," and Rose was like, "Hot, very hot, tired legs." I was like, "Okay, noted." Like, I'm glad we did it from the top down because going up would have been so bad and there would have been a lot of complaining.
That's hilarious.
So after our 5 nights in Rome, we checked out of our Airbnb and we walked to the train station and took a train to Florence. We stayed at Hotel Pondini, and I used the Capital One Purchase Eraser for this because it was $250 a night for a family room, which is awesome. So our room was like a king bed on one side, a bathroom, and then 3 singles on the other side. So like you just went in one door, and it was so nice. And it's right next door to where Pam and Jess, where you guys stayed. What was that small? It's like Palazzo Vecchio, maybe or something.
Palazzo Vecchietti or something like that.
It's a small luxury hotel, and which used to be with Hyatt, but we actually literally were like our doors were right next to each other. So I was like, the location was wonderful. We were able to walk everywhere. It was so close to the train station. Like we just all had backpacks. So it was like, oh, hop off the train, walk to our hotel, drop our bags. Like it was awesome. And so this was like $250 a night. We were here for 3 nights. And I just used Cap One purchase rate. So I paid for it with that card, erased the purchase on there for the points, and that was it. Breakfast was included. It was like a full spread. Like you could get lattes or cappuccinos every morning included. And then they had like ham and eggs and croissants and pastries and cereal and literally anything you could think of. And when we were in Florence, we went to the Accademia to see the Statue of David. That was big on my list because out of all the traveling I've done, Italy is like somewhere I really haven't been. So I've been to Venice one time and it was like 20 years ago. So this was like a lot of the big art pieces. I really wanted to go see these. And to be honest, the kids like really were interested. Like we spent multiple hours in every museum, which kind of surprised me. And they just like wandered around. They would look at everything. But of course, like when we came home, my mother-in-law was like, "How was your trip?" They were like, "It was great. We ate so much pasta." And they're like, "And we saw a lot of private parts." Because all the artwork. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
And we did a day trip to Pisa from Florence, which is also super easy. Just hopped on the train, a couple hours to Pisa, went and saw the Leaning Tower, wandered around, we had lunch while we were there, and then took the train right back to Florence. And another Airbnb experience we did. So this was like a highlight. So we did like a day at a Tuscan farm. We booked it through Airbnb experiences. And Tim actually had friends that were in Italy at the same time. So they met up with us and we did this together. And then we were so that they allow 10 people. And then there was another family. It was a husband and wife and a daughter from Canada, which worked out perfectly because she was like the same age as our girls. So we met at a train station and they had a guy like meet us there to help make sure we bought our tickets and got on the right train. And then when we got off the train in San Miniato, which is like in Tuscany, the owner of the farm, and he had a big 10-person van, and then they had a taxi to pick all of us up and take us to his farm, which was like 20 minutes from the train station. This place was so beautiful. Like not even lying, like after the day, Tim and I were like, how much does it cost to buy a farm in Tuscany? Like it was one of those places where it was like so magical.
This was another thing that I saw your pictures and videos of, and I was like, okay, I need to do that. So now I'm just actively planning a trip to Italy with my family, and I'm basically going to copy everything you did.
Yeah, and honestly, like, the girls were like, "This was better than a day at Disney World." Like, they loved this so much, and I think we kinda planned it, like, in the middle of our trip, and I think just from, like, a parent perspective of, like, they're when you're in a big city, you're constantly like, "Watch where you're walking, don't touch that, watch for cars," like, you're worried about pickpockets, like, all this stuff. So then you go to this farm where like they literally, the kids could just run free. You weren't worried about anything. You just be like, we're going to eat dinner in an hour. Come make sure you're back. And like, it was just such a nice break from all the city sightseeing. But this Airbnb experience, I'll link it in the show notes too. And it was like, so we got there, we got a tour of the farm. They make their own olive oil, they make their own wine, they grow their own vegetables. They like took us and threw us in the fall. You could do truffle hunting. They took us like out of the like gated area. So the farm's gated, so the wild boars don't come in and eat like all their crops. But so we went out through the gate, and they're like, there's the Apuan Alps, and that's like where they mine the Carrara marble. So like where like the statue of David comes from Carrara marble, like that's where they would mine it from. And then he's like, and over there is the town of Vinci. So it's like that's where Leonardo da Vinci was from. And I was like, this is incredible. Like all of this history just like in this, like on this hilltop. So it wasn't a cooking class, but they kind of like we went to the garden and like picked a whole he was like, I need a whole bunch of tomatoes. We need to get like one cantaloupe. He like had a list of like the things we needed to pick. And so all the kids were running around and putting it in a basket. And then we went up they had like a separate kitchen and like patio from their house. And we went in and we cooked all this food. And he was like, okay, so I need somebody that's gonna make this and somebody that's gonna make this. And so all the adults split up. And then he had a woman helping them helping, and he was like, "The kids are gonna make the desserts." So the woman was like helping the kids make all the desserts. And so then we cooked all the food and we sat down and had like this huge meal, and it was so wonderful. Like I can't even describe how like it was just such like a lovely experience. And the best part was after that, they had this huge like saltwater pool that overlooks the olive groves. So like then we had like 2.5 hours to just go swim and hang out before we had to catch our train back to Florence for the night. I would 100% recommend it.
Yeah, I remember seeing it too and being like, "Wow, this looks really magical." It's almost like for a minute you get to like have how I saw it, maybe not how it was in real life, but it looked like for a second like seeing what it would be like to live on a local farm in a smaller area in the
Mhm.
middle of Italy.
Yeah, and it was just, like, so nice, and the owner was Francesco, and his wife and 2 kids were away for the weekend, but he was like, "My kids go to the local school, like, next year they're going to the international school in Florence, so we'll have an apartment during the week there and have the farm on the weekends," and, they do have 2 houses that sleep up to 5 people that you can rent on Airbnb, and it was just so nice because, like, he was so friendly and so open. Like, we were like, "What is it like living here?" Because he lived in the US for a while, even though he grew up in this town. He was like, "I just had a calling to come back." He's like, "The farmers are getting older, and they're not taking care of their farms, and nobody wants to buy them because there's so much work." And he's like, "I just felt like this was something I could do for my community." And I was like, "That was so nice."
Yeah, awesome.
So from Florence, we went to Venice, and I have to say Venice was probably the most expensive city we were in, which I kinda get, like, there's no roads, like, everything has to be boated in every morning. So, like, it's expensive to get things there. We stayed at Hotel Nani Monsenigo Palace, and I paid $500 a night, which we had a family room that literally slept it was humongous, it was the whole attic apartment, but, like, I was looking because somebody asked for a recommendation for Venice, and I looked, and the price of the nights have, like, doubled. So, I don't know if it's a good deal anymore, but maybe randomly the prices change. But for us, it was a very good deal for Venice. It was kind of off the beaten track. We were able to walk there from the train station. So we, like, took the train right into Venice and then walked all the way there. It was maybe, like, a 20-minute walk. And, like, the water taxis pulled up right outside if you needed that. We really loved it, and while we were there, we did a day trip to Murano and Burano, and our hotel actually offered a free water taxi to one of the glass factories. I'm sure they have some kinda deal, like, worked out with them, but, like, the water taxis aren't cheap, but it was so cool, like, it was so cool that the girls were like, "I don't think we need to do a gondola ride." They thought the water taxis were cooler than the gondolas, and, like, because it's like a speedboat. You're like, "This is crazy," like so we did that one day. We went to a glass factory. I actually used the Travel Mod Squad coupon code for Flytographer, and we had family photos taken.
Yeah, you did. And they were beautiful. I only saw a handful of them, but they were amazing.
Yeah, and honestly, so with Flytographer, it's kind of like Airbnb for photographers. And they we used Marta in Venice, and she literally had us all of our photos to us within like a day. And it was cheaper than the local lady that we use here at home for like fall pictures every year for our Christmas cards. So I was like, all right, Christmas cards done. And our pictures are way cooler.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of cool to have, the Venice canals in the background versus like some trees.
Yeah, exactly. Like the leaves changing, which are like every year. So yeah, so that I would really recommend if people were looking to do family photos, like it really was a great experience and so nice to be able to do it. But we really loved Venice. I kind of wish we had more time. We only had 2 nights here. I probably could have easily spent 4. A lot of people are like, you can just do it as a day trip. And I'm like, no, you need more than a day because it's such a day trip destination that those early mornings and late evenings without all the tourists makes it even more special. And so, like, we were going to dinner and, like, we're eating earlier because we have the kids with us. So it was like 5, 6 o'clock. And, like, we're in a restaurant and there's nobody there. So, like, we were getting, like, extra attention from the wait staff and they were all giving us, like, extra bread or extra desserts or, like, all these, like, it was so nice.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That just reminds me of like when people go on cruises through the Mediterranean and or to Greece and they stop at Santorini for a day. I'm like, no, that's not the way to see it because you're there with a jillion other people and it's so much better when the cruise ships leave.
Yeah.
So I totally get that.
Yeah.
I have discussed in prior episodes that Venice was not my favorite, but after seeing you go there in your pictures and all your things, I was like, okay, I guess I should give it another shot. But how did it rank? I mean, okay, so compared to Rome and Florence, where did Venice rank for you?
So Rome was really cool because it has, like, all the iconic sites that you're gonna see, and Florence was, like, not as busy compared to Rome, but I thought Venice really just had, like, it had a different feel than the other cities, and I think it's really because, like, we were able to get out in the evenings when there, like, weren't as many tourists there or, like, we're getting out first thing in the morning. Like, when we had our photos done, we met the photographer at, like, 7 a.m. So, like, we're out, and it's, like, all you literally saw were people commuting to work, and, like, that was it, and I was like, "This is so nice, and it's so relaxing and calm," and I don't know, I actually think I probably like Venice the best, which is funny because that was the only one I've been to before, and it was, like, 20 years ago, and all I remember is how bad the pigeons were, and, like, they didn't feel that bad this time, but also, like, we weren't trying to, like, stay in St. Mark's Square the whole time either.
You cannot see my face, but my jaw was on the floor when Megan said that because I was not expecting that.
Maybe it never rained for you though, too, Jess. Like when you're walking around a city in rain, that's not
It's
very
the
fun.
worst, yeah.
Well, and it's like the streets there's like alleyways that are so narrow. And so if you're walking one way with an umbrella and someone is coming at you with
Yeah,
an umbrella, you
exactly.
feel like you're gonna lose your life. Like you feel like you're gonna get beheaded by a series of umbrellas. And so yeah, I mean, the rain definitely impacted it, but it's funny because we went to Lake Como, Florence, and Venice was like by far our least favorite of the 3.
Yeah.
So it's so funny how like different people have such different experiences.
Yeah, and honestly, like, we loved Rome, like, I'm already trying to plan, like, a trip back, but I definitely will not be doing it in July. It'll be, like, April or, like, October. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going back in this heat. I feel like I would love it more maybe and maybe that's, like, how you had rain in Venice. The heat in Rome was just, the heat was radiating off the buildings. Like, it was so hot. Alright, so from Venice, we flew to Paris, and we flew on Air France, like I said earlier. And we stayed at the Crown Plaza République, and originally I had booked a Airbnb because this was, like I've been to Paris a lot. I was a French major in college, so, like, France is, like, special to me. I have very specific neighborhoods I like to stay in, usually, like, the 5th and 6th, like, near Notre Dame, but with the Olympics, everything was so outrageously expensive. I was like, "This is crazy." So I booked an Airbnb, it didn't have air conditioning, and I was like, "I need to find a hotel that has air conditioning or Airbnb with air conditioning because this is not gonna work." And about 2 months before our trip, I saw the Crown Plaza, which is an IHG hotel, opened up some availability, but everything was on cash. So there was no points availability, open. But we had a family room, but the family room actually slept up to 6 people. So it's not my favorite location, but there are 4 metro stops literally right outside the hotel, so it was so easy to get around and get to everywhere, even though I typically like to be somewhere where I could walk everywhere. But this was, like, a special thing because of the Olympics, and I knew the crowds are gonna be crazy. But this hotel was so nice, they comped our breakfast, every morning, so, like, I have the IHG card, And I booked it directly through the IG website, and I used Rakuten, and it was like 10% cash back. So I got a whole bunch of cash back and a whole bunch of IHG points, paying cash. And when we got there, they were like, "Oh, well, kids eat free, so they'll be free for breakfast." But the adults were like 18 euros. And then our first morning at breakfast, the front desk came up to us and was like, "I'm so and so from the front desk. We just want to let you know your breakfast is covered." And we're like, "What?"
Right.
And
What?
I
Yeah,
was like,
that's amazing.
yeah, I was like, I can't wait to tell Pam because she's always like, "You get special things with the kids." And I was like,
It's
I was
so
like, they do.
true.
I think that's part of it. People are just like, "Oh, well, they're here with their family. Let's do something special for them." Like,
Pam's gonna be like, "Can I borrow your kids to go on a trip?"
yeah. But so our room had 2 queen beds and then 2 single fold-out couches. So it was a huge room for Paris standards. And the hotel is kind of like, I think it was in some movie or something, because I've never taken a taxi from the airport, but the train and the taxis were the same price because they had flat rates because of the Olympics. So I was like, "We're taking a taxi. It's hot. I'm not gonna walk." Because we're getting towards the end of our trip too. I'm like, "We just spent like 10 days in Italy sweating our butts off. I need to take a break." So we take our taxi, and he was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "Oh, the Crown Plaza, Republic." He's like, "Oh, a famous hotel." So I actually meant to look up why it was famous, but like, he knew where it was and knew exactly what we're talking about. But it is a big hotel, and I'm pretty sure standard rooms are bookable on points for up to a family of 4, which is when I was looking just now. There were a lot of IHG hotels that fit 4 people in a room, which is really rare for Europe. So I think definitely something to look into if a family's looking to travel there. But if you're looking to pay cash or save your points, this hotel, I would recommend it. Like, the hotel breakfast was humongous. The room was huge. Location was really great. It's right outside like a big square, and I don't know, like it exceeded expectations because I really wasn't sure what to expect. And so while we were in Paris, we only had 3 nights there. So we got in like late in the afternoon the first day, and so we just kind of like wandered around and got acclimated to the area. And then the next morning we had our table tennis tickets. And so we did that. And that was really exciting because there was a French athlete, and he was like the 17-year-old, and he was competing. So the stadium, like, I didn't expect table tennis to be like exciting. And like, I was like, it's gonna be moving fast because there's 4 tables and there's a lot of that things going on. But the crowd, it was like being at like a football game. Like, people were stomping on the bleachers and cheering so loud, and like
That is
it was
awesome.
nuts. Like, and I think it's because there was a French person competing, which is because there was nobody from the United States. So we're like, okay, we're cheering for the home team. Like, this is what we're gonna do. And everybody, like, they had their flags going and cheering. Like, it was so exciting, and like, I loved it. And each Olympic venue had like activities and stuff. So like, you would scan your ticket to get in, and then they had like misters going, and then they had like people on megaphones like trying to like amp up the crowds, and then they had like food and drinks for purchase, like all these like stalls, like probably like 10 or 12 of them at every event. And then they had like water refill stations, and they had like, it was just even being in the outside part of the arenas was really exciting, which was not expected because I really didn't know what we were going to see. But just even that was so fun. And then we went to the Louvre. So last time we were in Paris, we had the kids with us, was March 2020, when COVID was like shutting down the world. And so our trip got cut short, and we ended up heading to London and flying home from there. But we didn't get to go to the Louvre. And this was like, what, 4 years ago? And ever since then, the girls are like, "Remember that time we didn't get to see the Mona Lisa?"
They
So
won't
I
let you
was like,
forget it.
so I was like, "We are going to see the Mona Lisa on this trip." Um, so we went to the Louvre, and Eleanor especially, she was like on a mission. She was like, "I don't want to see anything else. I want to see the Mona Lisa." So she was like following the signs and like weaving in and out of everybody. And like, Tim's trying to keep up with her, and I have the other 2 trying to keep up with everybody. I was like out of breath because she was so determined to get there. And then like, they moved it into its own room now. So like, you have to kind of like queue through this like mob of people trying to get to the front to be able to see it. And afterwards they were like, "I'm so glad we got to see that." And like, it was so worth it. And even if we only spent a couple hours there, like, and didn't see everything on the list, like, getting to see the Mona Lisa is now like off their list, and they can be so happy that they got to do it. And then the next day we had beach volleyball tickets, And these were first thing in the morning. They were like 9 a.m. And this was the same thing. It's like once we got in, they had all the food stalls, they had the misters going, they had like gift shops. But for beach volleyball, since it was right under the Eiffel Tower, they had sand pits set up with like beach volleyball for people to play. So there were like adults having like a beach volleyball game. Then they
That
had
is
like
so cool.
demonstrations. Yeah, they had demonstrations for the kids. They had these like poles with the balls at different heights so you can jump up and spike them. But they had them, like, low enough so, like, the kids could do the low ones and the adults could do, like, the high ones, and so I thought, like, it was just really nicely run. I felt like there was something for everybody, like, even if you weren't going to an actual event, there was still, like, a lot of excitement around the city. I'm sure locals didn't really love it, but, like, as a tourist coming in, it felt very safe. There were police and volunteers everywhere. Like, the one day we got off the train station at Republique to go to the hotel, and they had people handing out boxes of water. And I was like, "This is so nice, like, just free water for everybody." Like
Yeah, it
yeah,
looked amazing, like, just seeing your stories from it. I'm not
yeah.
I was like, "Why did I not just get tickets and go? Like, we have the points. Why am I here? Why am I not in Paris right now?"
It's okay, Alex, because they're coming to LA and there's definitely a venue in LA that's exactly like being right under the Eiffel Tower. It's exactly the same.
Totally. LA's totally iconic like Paris, all that history.
Yeah. The next wi the Winter Olympics, I think, are in Milan next, and we're already kind of planning a trip over that February break, and the girls are like, "Why aren't we going to the Olympics in Milan?" I was like, "I don't even know, like, it's 2 years away, let me figure this out." But I do have to say, though, the Olympic experience was so, like, heartwarming. Like, they always say, like, "Oh, it's the Olympic spirit," like, everybody and that's like, it really was true, like, everybody was so nice, everybody was so patient with each other, like, even if your team wasn't competing, people were, like, high-fiving for, like, the other teams would make points and cheering, and, like, it was really, really exciting, and I would love to do it again. I don't know if I'm a Summer Olympics person, though, because it was so hot. I was like, "Maybe we'll do Winter Olympics again, like, in the future," but we'll
Well,
see.
Megan, you're officially invited 2034 Salt Lake City. Bring the girls and we'll go to the Olympics. It'll be here before we know it. Just a short 10 years.
I sent Alex when they announced that, I sent Alex a text and I was like, "Hey, if we're still friends in 2034, can I stay at your house for the Olympics?" And she was like, "Are you planning to not be my friend?" And
I'm like, I'm hoping we're still in business together and things are don't going great. What do you have in mind? Do you know something I don't know?
That's funny. Oh, and then the most exciting thing is we were on the Today Show. So we I, like, did my research ahead of time, and I was like, "Okay, they're filming from the Trocadero," and that but, like, they were at the top of, like, a museum. So I was like, "Okay, are they gonna come down?" Then my sister's texting me. She's like, "Al Roker's doing, like, spur of the moment, like, things in the mornings at, like, these hours." And I was like, "Okay, so we're gonna go watch all of our volleyball stuff, and then we walked all the way across." So, like, the bridges were closed to the Trocadero because of the Olympics, but we had to walk all the way around, and we walked over, and we kinda just, like, hung out. And I was like, "I'm just gonna stand here for a little bit." We were sitting in the shade. And then we noticed people started, like, congregating, and I was like, "Okay, I think we're in the right place." And then, like, an intern comes out with, like, a Today Show, like, tote bag, and I was like, "Alright, this is the guy we need to talk to." And he kinda was just like, "If you're American and you wanna be on the Today Show, like, come get" they had, like, little, like, Today NBC guests, like, badges for everybody. They made all of us, like, go in and get our bags checked and go through a metal detector, and then they kinda, like, kept us all, like, grouped together. And the girls were so funny because they don't know what the Today Show is, like and I was like, "We're gonna be on the news." And Eleanor literally was like, "I thought you were lying." And I was like, "No, like, we're literally on the news in America, like, grandma is texting me right now." Like,
That's hilarious.
but yeah, so that was really exciting, and it was really cool. So we did, like, an outdoor thing with, like, El Roker. Then they took us to, like, a place kinda, like, behind barriers, and then, like, Hoda Kotb came out, and, like, the rest of the news crew came out, and then, like, Flavor Flav was there, and he, like, went around and shook everybody's hand and was, so happy to be there, and, like, it was really cool.
That is so cool.
But that was, like, the end of our 3-day our quick very quick 3 days in Paris for the Olympics. From there, we took the Eurostar from Paris to Amsterdam. It was so easy. It was, like, a 3.5-hour train ride. Total for 2 adults and 3 kids, it was $227, but our train was, like, sold out. Like, every seat was taken. And I kind of feel like a lot of people had the same idea. Like my idea was I didn't want to fly home from Paris because I knew the airports were going to be insane. So I was like, well, let's get to Amsterdam. And then I was able to get the direct flights from there to Toronto. And I'm so glad we did because we had no issues. Everything like went so smooth. We spent 2 days in Amsterdam. Our first night we stayed at the Hyatt Regency, and that was 23,000 points per night. And we needed 2 rooms. Luckily, each room can fit up to 3 people. But the annoying part was they didn't have any connecting rooms available for us. And I was like, I requested this. I emailed ahead of time. Like I always tried to like cover all my bases and they still didn't. So we were like across the hall and like we pack all of our stuff together. So it was kind of annoying. Like the girls running between to get toothbrushes and get their clothes for the next day. But we really loved the location of the hotel. It's not busy. It was like a 10-minute metro ride from the central station. It was kind of more in like a residential area. I think Jess, you've stayed there before, but it was really nice. So we had like local restaurants that we could just go to, and it was easy to walk everywhere, and the crowds like weren't crazy, and we really liked it. I would definitely stay there again.
That's where we're staying when we go this fall too.
Yeah, it was worth it, and I think for the points
And I
amount,
hope we get a connecting room. I've done this. I did all the things you do, but now I'll just be prepared. Like it might not
I
happen.
know, it was such a bummer, and like she was like, we do have them, there's just not available, and there was a Viking cruise like group, so I think they probably just like had all the rooms booked up, and they probably get priority because they're regulars. But we were able to go to like the Rijksmuseum and like, it was so nice that the girls were recognizing art from, like, their art class. They're like, "That's a Van Gogh," or "That's a Monet," and they're like they were so excited because they were recognizing some of it, and I was like, the amount of famous art that we've seen on this trip was, like, off the charts. Like, we hit, like, almost all the big museums, and, like, the girls it was so nice to see it click in their brains too of like, "Oh my gosh, like, this is a big deal. Like, this is my art teacher showed us this as an example of this," and I'm like, "This was so cool," and such a good, like, feeling of, like, this is why we travel and this is why we do this.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah, and, like, we went to the Anne Frank house, but we didn't do the inside tour. I've done that on a previous trip, but to be honest with the girls, this was the end of our 2 weeks. I knew they were exhausted, and I didn't want them to, like, ruin other people's experiences because it's such a somber place, and
Yeah.
so I was like, we're not going inside." Like, I was like, "We will do this when you're a little bit older." Like, I think they probably could have dealt with it emotionally even at their ages, but I just feel like their craziness with each other wasn't gonna be able to be handled. And so, like, that was cool, and we kinda just wandered around a lot, found a lot of playgrounds. We got like, homemade stroopwafels that were, like, fresh, and they were so good. And that was really, like, the end of our trip, and then we flew home the business class flight, and I have to say, a lot of people, they always like, "I like the overnight flight when in business class so I can sleep." And to be honest, I really loved having it during the day because we were, like, wide awake. Everybody could just, like, enjoy everything, and I was like and it just felt, like, so special for everybody to get to experience that, and, like, the girls just loved it.
No, I know what you mean. I feel the same way as like when I fly business class overnight, it's always a struggle because I'm like, oh, I want to like have the dinner and watch a movie and enjoy it, but I need to go to sleep because I don't want to be tired. And so it's like this struggle of how to best use my time.
But yeah, that was really it, and I'll share all those links in the show notes and everything, and
That was really it, as if you didn't go on this, like, amazing 2-week adventure with your family of 5, but yes, that was all, that's it.
Yeah, and as Megan said earlier, they went to Japan this year with their kids too, and South Korea, and so, like, you're just killing it this year, which we do have an episode about that trip, so if you wanna hear about that one, go back to one of our previous episodes, because yeah, it's just I think it's just really inspiring seeing people travel with little kids to these big destinations because I think it can be really intimidating for a lot of people. So I think it just simplifies it and makes it seem like, okay, like this is doable. If Megan can do this, we can do this too. You give people
and
hope.
it really is, and it's not like we're, like, professional travelers or anything, like, we're not, our kids are in regular school, we travel over school breaks, and we just really make it work, and luckily, like, Tim has a flexible work schedule, and I have a flexible work schedule, and it really works for us, but I just am, like, being able to use points and miles to cut down on the cost has allowed us to do these trips that we'd probably do, like, 1 a year or 1 every other year or, like, sprinkle in a lot more domestic trips, But like being able to use points has just like opened up a world of being able to do this stuff now and not have to wait.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about all of you, but I was amazed that Megan took 3 kids on so many adventures on this trip and the Olympics. So jealous. It's amazing what you can do with credit card points and miles. If you'd like to learn how you can do this type of trip with your family, check out our free webinar, How to Get Your Next Vacation for Nearly Free. We'll put a link to register in the show notes.
Thanks so much for listening to Points Talk with the Travel Mom Squad. Make sure to hit the subscribe or follow button from wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. Want to start jet setting even faster? Follow the links in the show notes to learn about everything we discussed in today's episode. And to stay connected and follow along, follow us on Instagram at Travel Mom Squad. We can't wait to see where in the world points and miles take you.